Hey everyone, it's Allie, and today it's time to talk about the mid-game for our life-stacking Blade Vortex Bog Shaman. The mid-game of this build has genuinely been the single most fun I've ever had in Path of Exile. I cannot believe I'm having so much fun at life stacker, and well, I even managed to hit level 100 just a few days ago, and I've been blasting with this build, doing literally all content just fine, and trivializing every single thing I've come across. This build felt amazing at a low budget, but my god, once you put about 100 or so div into this build, it becomes absolutely insane. With all the things that we'll be discussing in this build, your clear is going to get a lot faster and a lot better. You're going to be able to start basically freezing your game as you walk into packs and chain explode your whole screen. We're going to give you quite a lot of additional damage. We're going to give you a stupid amount of additional regen. And most importantly, we're going to further be increasing our max hits to the point where we basically can face tank everything in the game, with the exception of some very heavy fizz hits, such as Uber Elder Shaper Slam, and maybe things such as T17 map bosses with atrocious map mods on them, and maybe things such as Haunted Rogue Exiles. Outside of that, with everything in this path of building, you'll basically be able to face tank everything in the game. And honestly, if I can hit level 100 with the build, you can also very easily hit level 100 with the setup and have literally zero problems AFKing and whatever content you're interested to do with it. Now, before we go any further, I do want to mention that there will be a path of building notes section that's going to also discuss every single little thing that we discussed in this video, and I highly recommend for you to go read through it. There are going to be crafting guides in the notes section for all the different items that we want to craft. So if you're interested in knowing how to make the items for yourself for a lot cheaper, I do recommend for you to read through that, or if you want a refresher on everything we discuss in this video, it's all going to be there as well. So with that said, let's start discussing what we're going to be changing in the build in the mid game. Now, there's going to be quite a lot of different upgrades you can make, and you do not have to make them in the order I'm going to discuss them in, but I am going to attempt to talk about them in order of importance, starting with what I would consider the most important thing. Now, the first thing we're going to discuss is going to be getting yourself an Awaken Unleash. At level 5, Awaken Unleash gives you +1 maximum seals. This maximum seal does the same exact thing as the Caster Mastery that we pick up at Mental Rapidity, meaning we can just completely drop it, as well as Mental Rapidity, giving us 4 passive points back. This is going to be a little bit expensive, but it's highly worth it given that, well, you're basically paying a few div for 4 passive points, which is a really, really good deal. You do not want to make the swap before it is level 5, as if you attempt to do this without it, you're going to kind of brick your build and it's going to feel pretty bad. So please make sure you keep Mental Rapidity and the Mastery until your Unleash does hit level 5. Now, the thing about this is it's going to take a while for it to actually hit level 5. So I'd recommend for you to do, if you have a little bit of extra money, is to go and purchase yourself 4 wild bramblebacks, which if you then go to the menagerie with, will allow you to increase the level of a non-corrupted awakened gem by 1. This means you can just buy yourself a level 1 Awaken Unleash, buy yourself 4 Bramblebacks, and very quickly level it to level 5 so you don't have to wait. It's going to be a little bit expensive to do so, as Bramblebacks are premium, but if you want to skip the wait, that would be the best thing to do. From there, you're going to get 4 passive points back, and you're welcome to basically do whatever you want with them. Ideally, you would recommend to go pick up more life, as well, life gives us damage, and life gives us EHP. After doing that, your next most important upgrade in the build is most likely going to be saving for a Rational Doctrine. Now, you could put this off until later and upgrade your rare gear first if you'd like to, but eventually, you are going to want to prioritize getting Rational Doctrine as soon as you can. This jewel is the single most powerful addition we can add to our build outside of a Mage Blade itself. What it does is it'll either give you Consecrated Ground if your Strength is your highest attribute, or Profane Ground on crit if your Intelligence is the highest. Ideally, what we're going to want to do in our build is balance both our Strength and our Intelligence, meaning we get both the Consecrated Ground and the Profane Ground at the same time. The Consecrated Ground is just going to be a raw 5% additional life regenerated per second. Given that Rational Doctrine also makes it linger for 4 seconds, you will literally have 100% uptime on this at all times, and given that it scales with life regeneration rates, which we have on our Watcher's Eye, on our gear, and our passive tree, realistically, this 5% is going to be turned into something like 8% life regen per second, giving you an absurd amount of additional recovery out of thin air. Because every time you press Shield Charge or Frost Blink or BV or whatever, you momentarily stand still for a fraction of a second, as long as you don't have a period of 4 seconds where you literally do not press a single ability and are just walking forward, you'll never have to think about Rational Doctrine at all. Realistically, it's just plug and play, and you just get a stupid amount of regen, which feels really good. What we can then do with this regen is we can then also fit in a Righteous Fire. Now, you could have potentially fit in Righteous Fire at a lower budget level if you wanted to, but it probably didn't feel very comfy, given that you didn't have much regen to begin with. With Rational Doctrine, you now have more than enough regen. This is the perfect time to fit in for an additional 40% more damage. What we're going to do is we're going to link it to an automation, so it just automatically turns itself on at the start of every map. You don't have to think about it. And if you can, link an Empower to it as well for a little bit of extra damage, but you do not need the Empower at all. The other portion of this is going to be the Profane Ground. This is going to be something that gets created under every single monster when you crit them, giving you 100% increased critical strike chance, effectively being an extra mini Bottled Faith. While clearing, this is not going to really do anything, but on bosses, this should very easily get you to 100% crit chance, meaning if you wanted to, you could potentially even consider dropping your Bottled Faith completely. Given we're going to be pushing to about 15,000 plus life in the build in the mid game, you'll have more than enough crit chance from your Rat Pith and your life that the Ball of Faith kind of becomes completely irrelevant, and you can replace it with whatever flask you want. Now, the difficult part here is going to specifically be to balance your strength and intelligence so you get both effects at once. If this seems like too much effort, or if it doesn't seem like something that's feasible given what your gear currently looks like, at least make sure your strength is higher, because the whole reason we bought this jewel is for the consecrated ground. If you have 0 attributes on all of your gear, and if you have every single one of your strength nodes tattooed into a tattoo the Tukohama Shaman, you should have 24 total strength. At the same time, what we're going to be doing is we're now going to be tattooing every single intelligence node with a tattoo the Toho Warrior for 5% increased chaos damage. Not only is this going to make your clear better because it applies to your obliteration explosions, making them more consistent, but it's also going to apply a single target damage, giving you a pretty decent boost in DPS, where each tattoo is worth about 0.5% of extra DPS. If you tattoo every single one of your int and every single one of your strength nodes, you'll have a total of 24 strength and 42 intelligence. Now, the issue with this is that there's no easy way for us to get our strength to also have the same ending number as our intelligence. Getting that 2 extra strength is very difficult to do, and if we were able to get it, we simply could have just removed 2 strength tattoos, and then, well, everything is good. If you have a heavy belt with a strength implicit on it, it should actually be fairly easy for you to do this, and balancing this should be as simple as just removing a few intelligence tattoos and blessing your belt over to the point where they're equivalent to each other. If you don't have a heavy belt and you have no attributes anywhere else, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to grab ourselves an additional 28 strength on our jewels to be able to match our strength to our intelligence. With 28 total strength on your jewels, either through the raw plus strength mod or the strength to dex mod, you'll then be able to hit 52 strength. What we could do is we can simply remove 1 single tattoo to then increase our int by 10, making our strength and int equivalent to each other. So TLDR here, just grab yourself Rational Doctrine, make sure your strength is highest to begin with, and eventually to balance it, grab yourself 28 total strength, either on your gear, on your jewels, or wherever. So you're sitting at 52 strength, and then remove 1 tattoo to then get your intelligence to 52 as well, assuming you have no intelligence anywhere else. It's a little bit annoying to do this balancing act, and again, it's a lot easier once you give yourself a mage blade later on, or if you have a strength roll anywhere on your gear, but without it, it's unfortunately a little bit of a struggle. From there, what we can then next look at as an upgrade is going to be changing our amulet from a Marlene's Fallacy over to an Eyes of the Greatwolf. Eyes of the Greatwolf is kind of like a Watcher's Eye, but on an amulet slot, where whenever it drops, it's going to roll with 2 random implicits out of a big pool of mods. What we're ideally looking for here is to get ourselves a Greatwolf with maximum life on it, and then either % physical damage reduction or critical strike multiplier on it. Personally, I went for one with life and PDR on it, as this makes you substantially tankier, given that you're going to get life from the Greatwolf itself, where Marlene's doesn't give you any, and because physical damage is the only thing we're even remotely scared of in this build, the 12% PDR from this is a massive increase to your total physical hits, making you feel substantially tankier. If you just want to do more damage instead, grabbing yourself a crit multi one is really good. It should be a pretty decent DPS upgrade over Marlene's, but the important thing is that you're going to get somewhere around 500 to 600 extra life, make you even tankier than before, give you more regen, and just overall make your build feel comfier. There'll be trade links and notes section for both versions of the amulets, and realistically, just grab yourself whatever you can, as they aren't too common, and honestly, I kind of do expect all of them to get bought out when this video comes out. If that's the case, you can simply just stick with your Marlene's and be just fine. The thing about Marlene's is it's going to be a little bit more difficult to fix your Rational Doctrine, so do keep that in mind that you might need even more strength if you do decide to stick with it in the long term. From there, the final major upgrade we can make for our build, outside of crafting a bunch of rare gear for ourselves, is going to be getting yourself a Profane Bloom Flesh and Flame pair. Now, these are very expensive, and this is most likely going to be the last thing you're going to want to do in the mid-game version of this build before you're ready to save for something like a Mage Blood, or honestly, you might even want to get a Mage Blood before getting yourself a Flesh and Flame, and then moving on over to the endgame setup. Profane Bloom is an occultist ascendancy that gives us a 50% chance for corpses to explode if they are cursed when they die. This is the same exact mod as Obliteration, meaning it's going to stack with Obliteration, and it's going to also stack with Unspeakable Gifts, giving you a total of 80% chance for enemies to explode when you kill them. This is where you're going to get the absurd screen clear that you see in all the B-roll. We have a stupid amount of area of effect in this build, and we have quite a lot of generic scaling for these explosions, but the only thing that we're missing to be able to get the insane chain reactions is just more chance for explosion, as the 30% that we had before just isn't enough to get you insane screen wide clear. You could potentially completely skip out on a Flesh and Flame pair completely if you don't care for additional clear, or if you don't feel like it's worth it for you, and just simply use 2 more rare jewels, and that's completely up to you. If you do decide to go grab yourself a Profane Bloom Flesh and Flame, what you're going to have to do is you're going to now have to give yourself a Despair on hit ring, as we need to make the explosions themselves, which are a hit, curse enemies, because if they don't curse another enemy when they explode, you're not going to really get a chain reaction. Without a curse on hit ring, the Flesh and Flame literally don't do anything, and they're just a massive paperweight. What we're going to also then do on top of this is we're going to be swapping out Felfen for Venom Drinker instead. Now, Venom Drinker is not that good, unfortunately. It is pretty nice, but the issue here is that the uptime of it is not 100%. It feels really good in high density content like Harvest or Harpies or T17s or anywhere where you're fighting a lot of monsters at once. But in general mapping, it doesn't necessarily do too much, but when it does do something, it feels really nice as the +5 maximum all-res is a pretty large increase to your EHP, and it's a pretty large increase to your regen, given it's going to give you +5 max fire res, reducing the amount of degen that your righteous fire is going to do to you. This will make you lose about 10% of your DPS, as Felfen is still better than using Despair, but the point is that this makes you a little bit tankier, and if you don't care to be tankier, you can simply just keep Felfen like before, with a Despair on hit ring, which will effectively basically do nothing, meaning that you don't have to necessarily look for Despair on hit then, and you can find yourself any Fracture Curse on hit instead. What we're then going to have to do is we're going to have to go to our amulet and change out the Force of Darkness Anoint on it for a Whispers of Doom Anoint, as we need a total of 2 curse limit. If we don't do this, every time we go to a boss, we're going to be spamming Despair on hit onto the boss, which is going to do literally nothing, overriding our Assassin's Mark and making us lose quite a lot of DPS. Now, in the end game, we might potentially completely do away with this, and we might just completely drop Assassin's Mark completely and maybe figure out a way to get power charges in a different way. But in the mid game, if you want to set up a Profane Bloom setup, you're going to have to go grab yourself, ideally, a Despair on hit ring. You're going to then drop your Felfen for Venom Drinker. You're going to anoint Whispers of Doom onto your amulets. And then, well, if you simply go touch a single mob, you should see the whole screen explode. It's not going to feel amazing if you're doing low density content, but if you do something like a Breach, a Harvest, a Ritual, a T17 map, you're going to notice some pretty nice chain explosions. Finally, the last thing that we need to discuss as your mid-game upgrades are going to be what we're going to be doing about all of your gear. Now, for every single slot, there's going to be a full crafting guide in a note section on exactly how to make them. If you want to quickly go over what we're actually going to be doing with our gear, it's well, pretty simple. We're going to be running exactly the same gear as we're running in the early game setup, except we're now going to be looking for a bunch of fractures to be able to get tier 1 prefixes on every item, while at the same time crafting all these items with the best possible ES bases we can, giving us a very large amount of additional life. In total, you should be gaining somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 life crafting all these items. I would realistically recommend for you to make these items before you go and grab yourself something like a Profane Bloom, but I'd probably do it after Rational Doctrine, as again, Rational Doctrine is just substantially more important of an upgrade. Outside of basically just crafting all of our items on our own for substantially more life, there really isn't anything else to say here, as we are just going to get some resistances as needed to be able to res cap, as well as just trying to craft things such as life regeneration rates on our helmet, our boots, and our gloves. And with that, that's pretty much everything we really need to discuss for the mid-game of this build. Realistically, nothing much is changing in the build, other than us changing a few core items around and us grabbing ourselves better versions of what we already have. But these upgrades, even though they're not really changing much other than just making whatever you already have better, are going to pretty drastically increase your DPS, your clear, your max hits, and just make the build overall substantially stronger. In total, I would say that everything that we discussed here, outside the Flesh and Flame pair, because those are unfortunately just skyrocketing price, should be about 100 div or so in total. And with that, you can pretty much do T17s, Uber bosses, and whatever other content you want with ease, and you should have a really comfy and fun time doing so. This would be pretty easy for you to hit level 100 with the setup, and this is basically exactly what I hit 100 with. And overall, you should have a very, very comfy time in all content currently available in the game. Moving forward, in a few days, we're going to be discussing the end game of this build, where we're going to start talking about super high-end crafts that are going to cost 50, 60, 100 plus div to make, and we're going to be discussing how to min-max the build to an absurd degree. Realistically, if you get everything in the mid-game guide, your only other real goal from here, if you do not want to ultra super heavy min-max, is to grab yourself a Mage Blood, which is going to be an absurd game changer for the build, and you having that Mage Blood is going to be where the starting point for the end game guide is going to begin. If you have any questions on any of this, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to help you as soon as I can. I also stream on Twitch every single day, so feel free to come by Twitch and ask me any of your questions there. And I hope you're enjoying the build as much as I am. I hope you are having fun doing whatever content you're doing with it and investing more money into it. And with all that said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next video.